Fam, let's take it back to June 19th, 1978. St. Louis is absolutely bleeding. Dennis Haymon is in the middle of a war, and to be honest, he's losing. The Petty brothers are winning, and they're winning badly. They've already taken out 3 of his associates and wounded 4 others. Lorenzo Petty, a guy the cops called one mean dude, is picking off Haymon's crew one by one. But tonight isn't even about the war. It's about money. See, Jerome Brown owes Haymon a debt, and in this game, Haymon doesn't forget debts. Richard Ford's driving eastbound on Delmar Boulevard. His cousin Jerome sits passenger side, 27 years old, father, son, cousin, just trying to get home. They stop at a red light, North Taylor Avenue intersection. Another car pulls up on the right, stops next to them. Gunfire. Jerome Brown is shot multiple times. Ford tries to escape, but it's too late. 3 days later, Jerome dies from his injuries. Dennis Haymon gets charged with capital murder. But here's what makes this different. This isn't even his first body. Earlier that decade, Haymon was charged with killing Killer Earl Jr., the high-profile case that catapulted him into the top tier of St. Louis's heroin trade. Witnesses were too terrified to testify. Case dropped. But the Jerome Brown case, that one sticks. May 1979, Haymon's convicted. Life sentence, Missouri State Penitentiary. The Kingpin era ends in a courtroom. But this story doesn't start with Jerome Brown, and it doesn't end with a life sentence. This story starts with a boy born to blind parents, fighting to survive in projects where violence was currency. This is how Dennis Haymon became St. Louis's most feared drug lord. This is how he lost everything. And this is how 25 years in prison transformed a killer into a pastor. The streets of St. Louis remember the Kingpin, but do they believe in redemption? Can a man who poisoned his own community ever truly be forgiven? This is the story of Dennis Haymon, drug lord, murderer, pastor, and the impossible question of whether some sins are too great to be redeemed. The 1950s, St. Louis projects. A boy is born to parents who cannot see him. Dennis Haymon's parents, both blind. The struggle for survival begins before Dennis takes his first breath. In a world where most children have eyes watching over them, Haymon has none. He learns early, you protect yourself or you perish. Growing up in the urban inner city, Haymon watches the renowned street characters who control the downtown projects, drug dealers, enforcers, men with money, respect, and power, men who survive by being feared. In the projects, there are 2 paths, victim or predator. Dennis Haymon is too smart to be prey. Now here's the thing, he didn't exactly choose the drug game. You could say the game chose him. Back then, the most ruthless crew in the Pruitt-Igoe projects gave him a simple ultimatum, join or die. So Haymon did what he had to do to survive. He joined up, started moving heroin, and learned the game from the bottom up. It wasn't about ambition yet, it was just about making it to the next day. The early 70s belonged to Fat Woods and Killer Earl Williams. They run the Cass Avenue corridor, control Pruitt-Igoe, dominate downtown St. Louis. Earl Williams is a Vietnam War veteran, Marine Corps sniper, 26 arrests between 1970 and 1973, 3 murder acquittals. Nobody testifies against Killer Earl, nobody dares. 1973, Haymon gets his first conviction, heroin possession, 2 years probation. It's a slap on the wrist, a warning he ignores, because by now, Haymon's learning how the system works. Witnesses are terrified, juries don't convict, dealers walk free. Then comes the case that changes everything. Haymon gets charged with killing Killer Earl Jr., the son of Fat Woods' chief enforcer. The murder is high profile, brutal, the kind that sends a message across every project in the city. But once again, witnesses vanish, testimonies evaporate, fear wins, the case gets dropped. Dennis Haymon's reputation explodes. Street legend says If you can kill Killer Earl's son and walk free, you're untouchable. The charge, even without conviction, catapults Haymon into the high echelon of St. Louis drug rackets. By the mid-70s, Dennis Haymon isn't just a dealer. He's the top kingpin in St. Louis, operating out of Carr Square Village projects off Cass Avenue, moving heroin through a city drowning in addiction, making money most people can't imagine, buying real estate, legitimate businesses, trying to legalize himself. But the streets keep pulling him back. They always do. Respect comes with territory. Territory comes with conflict. And by 1978, Haymon's facing his biggest threat yet. 3 brothers from the north side, Lorenzo, Sam, Joe, the Petty brothers. Well, and they're about to turn St. Louis into a war zone. Meet the Petty brothers, Lorenzo, Sam, and Joe. If Haymon controls Carr Square Village downtown, the Pettys own the north side, O'Fallon Park, Fairground Park. Their operation isn't just feared, it's organized, heavily armed, ruthless. Lorenzo's the muscle, the enforcer. Detective Pete Gobert would later say, Lorenzo is one mean dude, and just about everybody is scared to death of him. When Lorenzo was 15, he killed a man over a petty dispute, 25 cents. It set the pattern for decades of violence. 2 years later, charged with murdering a 16-year-old. 1969, he and Joe plead guilty to manslaughter after killing 2 young people in Pruitt, Idaho. They served time and were released. Released 1972, back on the streets, more dangerous than ever. Sam's the brains, general of the Black Liberators, a militant civil rights group active in the late 60s. When Sam was 14, he shot and killed an 18-year-old ex-convict, claimed self-defense. A coroner's jury refused to rule it murder. Later, Sam gets arrested in New York with H. Rap Brown, FBI's most wanted, for attempted robbery of 25 people in a Manhattan bar. Shootout with police. Sam and another liberator served time in New York. Released in 1978, returning to a war already raging. Sam comes home angry, revolutionary, connected to Black militants nationwide, and ready to expand the family business. Joe's the youngest, loyal, deadly, works under Lorenzo in the heroin operation. Together, the 3 brothers aren't just dealers, they're a paramilitary outfit. They own a confectionery at Carter and College Avenues, CNC Market. It's their base, their fortress, and it becomes ground zero for the bloodiest drug war in St. Louis history. By February of '78, the streets were already boiling, but the match that lit the powder keg was Leo Foster. He was a dealer who got shot 4 times and passed away in March. Now, Lorenzo Petty got booked for that body, but the charges didn't stick. When Foster died, his territory became the flashpoint, and what started as simple street tension turned into an all-out war. Or maybe it's bigger than territory. Detective Sergeant Herb Riley puts it simply. When you've got something that costs 300 times the cost of gold, you're going to have trouble. Heroin isn't just valuable, it's liquid power, and there's only so much to go around. March 11th, shootout at the Petty Brothers confectionery. Sam claims robbery attempt. Police don't believe him. April 22nd, another shootout at the confectionery. 3 shotguns, 2 rifles found in the street. A car rented by Haymon's girlfriend abandoned nearby. Lorenzo fights off attackers with his own weapon. Police call it an assassination attempt. April 25th, Charles Cherry, Haymon associate, found dead in an East St. Louis alley. Authorities believe Lorenzo and Joe killed Cherry because he refused to set up Haymon. May 16th, Robert Sanders, Haymon associate, and a Blue Room barmaid wounded in a shooting. May 23rd, Ronnie Cook shot in the head, dropped at hospital in critical condition. Bullet-riddled car found nearby, rented by Haymon's girlfriend. May 25th. And Kenneth Vaughn, shot on Interstate 70, claims Haymon and 2 others fired from a passing car. By June 1978, St. Louis is drowning in blood. Investigators are clear. Haymon has been losing the battle badly. At least 3 of his associates dead, 4 wounded. The Pettys, only 1 associate killed. Haymon's outgunned, outmanned, desperate, but desperate men make fatal mistakes. And on June 19, 1978, Dennis Haymon makes his. June 19, 1978, Richard Ford is driving his Oldsmobile down Delmar Boulevard, just a normal evening, music playing. In the passenger seat is his cousin, Jerome Brown, a 27-year-old father, son, and cousin. They pull up to a red light at North Taylor Avenue, minding their own business. Suddenly, another car pulls up on the right side and stops parallel to them. The windows roll down, and before they can react, gunfire erupts. Jerome is hit multiple times. Ford floors it, trying desperately to escape, but the damage was done. 3 days later, Jerome succumbed to his injuries. Police investigate. Witnesses point to Dennis Haymon, but this wasn't about the drug war, wasn't about the Petty brothers, wasn't territorial. Authorities conclude Jerome Brown simply owed Haymon money. A debt collection turned murder. July 20th, 1978. Dennis Haymon gets indicted. Capital murder, death penalty case. But Haymon's been here before. Charges don't stick when witnesses disappear. He posts $75,000 bond, walks free, continues running his operation while awaiting trial. The war with the Petty brothers doesn't stop. July 4th, 12 days after Jerome dies, snipers open fire from a rooftop into a crowd outside JC's Get Up Lounge. Lindell Boulevard and Whittier Street, 6 people shot. Sandra Porter, 21, from Pagedale, killed. An innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. Police believe the snipers were targeting Haymon, but hit civilians instead. July 20th. Same day, Haymon gets charged with capital murder. That afternoon, police catch him attempting to assassinate Joe Petty. Petty's sitting in a car outside C&C Confectionery with 2 associates. A police officer writing a parking ticket nearby sees Haymon drive up and open fire. Multiple shots into the car, nobody injured. Haymon flees, short chase, arrested. July 21st. Haymon's released on $15,000 bond. Circuit Attorney George Peach is furious, publicly criticizes the magistrate for setting bonds so low. A man charged with capital murder caught attempting another murder hours later, and he walks free for $15,000. October 2nd, Joe Petty shot in the hip from ambush while getting out of his car, refuses to name attackers, tells police, "I'll handle it myself." Informants tell authorities that Haymon and his Lieutenant Griffin were among the shooters. October 8th, Kenneth Vaughn, wounded in May, shot again. This time outside Stadium 2, Cine downtown. 3 innocent bystanders also wounded. Larry Washington, a dealer for Haymon, saw Vaughn in the theater and decided to shoot him. Washington is killed 6 days later. By late 1978, the body count is staggering. The violence is out of control. And Dennis Haymon, out on bond for murder, is still running his organization from the streets. But the walls are closing in. Richard Ford, the witness who survived the Jerome Brown shooting, is the key. Ford saw everything, can identify Haymon, can put him at the scene, can testify. The prosecution needs him. So does Haymon, but for very different reasons. January 7th, 1979, the day before Haymon's trial is scheduled to start. Richard Ford's driving in St. Louis. Notices a car following him closely. Pulls over toward the curb. Stops. The car pulls alongside. Ford hears a loud noise. His window shatters. Another explosion. He's shot in the wrist. Then 4 more times. A man in a ski mask steps out with a weapon. Ford recognizes him. It's Haymon. Another man exits the car. They open fire on Ford's vehicle. And Ford is shot multiple times. He forces the jammed passenger door open, runs across the street to a porch where a man is standing. The man goes inside, closes the door on Ford, locks it. Ford collapses on the porch, bleeding. Police arrive. Ambulance takes Ford to the hospital. 2 weeks later, Ford moves to California, terrified, but alive and willing to testify. May 21st, 1979, the state of Missouri files a memorandum, elects to proceed with second-degree murder instead of capital murder. The case goes to trial. Richard Ford testifies, identifies Haymon, describes the shooting. The jury deliberates. May 25th, 1979, verdict, guilty, second-degree murder. Sentence, life in prison, Missouri State Penitentiary under the Second Offender Act. Dennis Haymon, the untouchable Kingpin, arm is going away, and this time there's no walking free. (1979) Missouri State Penitentiary. Dennis Haymon begins a life sentence. No parole, no release date, just concrete walls and the rest of his existence. He's in his mid-20s. For most men, a life sentence is the end, the final chapter. But Haymon, he feels invincible, like Legs Diamond in the movie saying, "They can't kill me." He survived the streets, survived the Petty brothers, survived 2 murder charges, got convicted on 1, but he's still breathing, still alive. And in his mind, that means he's untouchable. The Kingpin mentality doesn't disappear behind bars. Haymon carries it with him. The reputation, the respect, the fear. In prison, he doesn't bow, doesn't break. He's Dennis Haymon, top Kingpin of St. Louis. Nobody forgets. But prison has its own rules, its own hierarchies. And respect on the streets means nothing when you're locked in a cell with men who have nothing to lose. 1986, 7 years into his sentence, Haymon's transferred to Arizona State Prison. Different system, different politics. He's a Muslim now, has been for years, finds community with other Muslim inmates, protection, purpose. But Arizona's prison system is controlled by white supremacists, and the Aryan Brotherhood doesn't tolerate Muslims. One day, Haymon's in the yard. Maybe he says the wrong thing. Maybe he's in the wrong place. Maybe the Aryan Brotherhood just wants to make a point. The Aryan Brotherhood attacks with makeshift weapons. Haymon fights back, but he's overpowered. Multiple stab wounds. He collapses. Guards intervene. Ambulance, hospital. He survives. Now, if most men in this situation would break, they'd find God right there in that hospital bed and swear off the life that got them there. But not Haymon. If anything, surviving that attack made him worse. In his mind, it was proof. He took 8 stab wounds and was still breathing. He started believing that line from the movies, "They can't kill me." It wasn't just a slogan anymore. It became his identity. He's convinced God's hand is on him, not for redemption, but for invincibility. He's chosen, protected, destined to survive no matter what. The violence doesn't scare him straight. It hardens him, makes him colder, more reckless, more convinced that nothing can touch him. People say, there isn't enough God to save this man? And Haymon believes them, believes he's beyond saving, beyond redemption, beyond change. For 5 more years, he lives like this, angry, defiant, isolated. The Muslim community gives him structure, but it doesn't give him peace. The prison yard gives him reputation, but it doesn't give him purpose. The years drag on. 1987, 1988, 1989, 1990. By January 1991, Dennis Haymon has served 12 years. 12 years in hell, 12 years surviving, but not living. And something inside him is starting to crack, not breaking, cracking, like a fault line before an earthquake. The invincibility complex is wearing thin. The anger is exhausting. The emptiness is suffocating. One morning, Haymon looks in the mirror, really looks. And for the first time in over a decade, he sees himself clearly. Not the Kingpin, not the survivor, not the untouchable legend. He sees a man who is troubled, despondent, lost. A man with no purpose and no future. A a man whose past is filled with bodies and whose present is filled with nothing. And Dennis Haymon begins to dislike what he sees. January 1991, the mirror moment. Haymon sees what he's become, and he doesn't like it, but transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's not a single prayer or a single decision. It's a process, long, painful, honest. Haymon's been Muslim for years. Islam gave him structure, community, but looking in that mirror, he realizes structure isn't salvation. Community isn't redemption. Something deeper needs to change, something fundamental. He needs to confront not just what he's done, but who he is. He starts reading Christianity, the Bible, the teachings of Jesus Christ, forgiveness, grace, second chances, and concepts that feel foreign after 2 decades of violence, but they're compelling, transformative. For the first time, Haymon considers that maybe, just maybe, change is possible. The conversion isn't instant, it's gradual, wrestling with guilt, wrestling with shame, wrestling with the question, can a man who poisoned his own community, who took lives, who built an empire on suffering, can that man be redeemed? Christianity says yes. God's hand, Haymon realizes, was never on him for invincibility. It was on him for transformation. All those times he survived, the petty brothers, the Aryan Brotherhood, the drug war, weren't proof he was chosen to be untouchable. They were proof he was chosen to be changed. 1991 becomes 1992, 1993, 1994. Haymon's a different man now, not perfect, not sinless, but different. He's studying theology, mentoring younger inmates, preaching in prison chapels. 12 years he lived his way, violent, arrogant, invincible. Now he's living 13 years with Jesus Christ, learning humility, learning service, learning what it means to actually be redeemed. Around 1994, 3 years after his conversion, Dennis Haymon starts pastoring, behind bars, leading services for men just like him, broken, lost, convicted, forgotten. He tells them his story, not to glorify it, but to show them transformation is possible, that no man is beyond God's reach, that the mirror moment can come for anyone. The years continue, 1995, 1996, 1997. Haymon's not just serving time anymore. He's rebuilding himself, piece by piece. The streets taught him how to survive. Prison taught him how to endure. But faith teaches him how to live. By the time the 21st century arrives, Dennis Haymon has served over 20 years. His hair is graying, his body is older, but his mind is clearer than it's ever been. And somewhere in the Missouri prison system, conversations are happening. Parole boards, evaluations. A man who entered prison as a violent kingpin is leaving as an ordained minister. 2004. 25 years after his conviction, Dennis Haymon walks out of prison, not because his sentence ended. Life sentences don't end, but because the man who entered prison in 1979 no longer exists. The parole board sees what the mirror showed Haymon 13 years earlier, a transformed man, a man who served 12 years his way, 13 years God's way, and emerged with a mission. Haymon's now in his early 50s, ex-convict, former drug lord, convicted murderer, but also pastor, ordained elder, a man with a calling. The streets of St. Louis are waiting, and Dennis Haymon has unfinished business, not with rivals or debts or territory, but with redemption. (2023) Dennis Haymon is 70 years old. He's been free for nearly 2 decades, and he's built a life that would have been unimaginable in 1978. He's the founding pastor of Believers Temple Word Fellowship. Nearly 3 decades of ministry behind him, first in prison chapels, now in the same city where he once ran a heroin empire. The irony isn't lost on him. The geography is the same, the streets are the same, but the mission is inverted. Where he once brought destruction, he now brings hope. His church isn't mega church big. It's not televised or famous, but it's real. It's full of people who've lived the life Haymon lived. Ex-addicts, ex-convicts, families destroyed by the streets. And every Sunday they hear from a man who walked the path they're on, who made it out, who changed. But Haymon doesn't just preach. He acts. He founded A Few Good Men Plus One, a non-profit movement against violence. The name is intentional. A few good men can change a community, plus one. Always room for one more. One more young man pulled from the streets. One more kid who doesn't make Haymon's mistakes. He works with at-risk youth, speaks at juvenile detention centers, visits high schools, sits down with teenagers who remind him of himself at their age. Angry, hopeless, convinced the only way out is through violence. He tells them his story, not sanitized, not glorified, raw, honest. The blind parents, the forced entry into the drug game, the bodies, the war, the prison stabbing, the mirror, and then he tells them the part that matters most. Transformation is possible. No matter what you've done, no matter how deep you're in, no matter how many people say you're beyond saving, change is possible. 2023, Darren Seals organizes a roundtable on youth crime in St. Louis. The city's teen violence is out of control. Another generation is bleeding. Haymon stands before the crowd and says, "I'm one of few men in this city who lived that life. I was a drug dealer and drug lord. The youth crime is out of control in our city. You know, we're not looking for a total 180-degree turn in a day, but some sort of movement." 14-year-old Dion Moore is in the audience. He's been in SEAL's mentoring program for 2 years. His 15-year-old friend was shot and killed. Moore listens to Haymon speak, listens to the other men, and says, "Yes, I do believe they can make a difference if they can get the right team and right audience. That's the mission now, getting the right team, reaching the right audience. One kid at a time." The turnaround has been so real that the NAACP even gave him an Outstanding Healthcare Service Award. During COVID, the same man who allegedly poisoned the community was out there partnering with Barnes Jewish Hospital to heal it with vaccines. But let's be real, not everybody is ready to forgive and forget. If some people still look at him and just see an ex-convict. Some doors are still closed, and honestly, you have to ask yourself, can you ever truly outrun a past like that? Haymon acknowledges it. Not everyone is open to my training. There's still pushback and some doors get shut. And the question lingers. Does 28 years of ministry balance the heroin? Does saving one kid erase the lives destroyed in the 1970s? Does redemption equal restitution? Haymon doesn't claim it does. He wrote 2 books, From Guns to Redemption and CREAM, Rising to the Top, and in both, he's brutally honest. Innocent of capital murder, but guilty of a lifestyle. That's the truth he carries. He maintains he didn't kill Jerome Brown. The conviction he believes was wrong, but the lifestyle, the violence, the empire built on suffering, that he owns fully, completely. And so Dennis Haymon keeps working, keeps preaching, keeps reaching, because redemption isn't a destination, it's a direction. St. Louis remembers Dennis Haymon, the Kingpin. The question is, will history remember Dennis Haymon, the redeemed? The Petty brothers won the war. Lorenzo caught 15 years federal time, released at 57, now preaches redemption like Haymon. Sam died of cancer in Atlanta. Joe died in a motorcycle accident, 1984. 2 survivors remain, both warning the next generation, both trying to stop the cycle. And that brings us to the real question here. Fam, Dennis Haymon served his time. He's been preaching for almost 30 years now, trying to save the next generation from making his same mistakes. But does that erase the past? Can a man who flooded the streets with heroin ever truly be forgiven by the community he poisoned? Or are some debts just too big to ever be paid off? Let me know how y'all feel about this one in the comments. Was it a true transformation, or is the damage already done? Don't forget to like, and subscribe for more stories like this. I catch you guys on the next one.